are now moving on to the admissions presentation. So I'd like to invite Lauren to the screen. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Schroeder. My pronouns are she, her. And I'm sure, as you know, if you're here right now, we're going to talk about all things to do with UBC engineering admissions and just the admissions process in general. So there is going to be quite a bit of information. We're a little bit behind schedule, but there will be lots of information shared here. But do know that if for whatever reason, like you have to take off, or maybe we don't get to your questions after the session finishes today, there are weekly virtual information sessions that have a live Q&A with myself or many of my colleagues in student recruitment. And you can just register for one of those at our website. And if you're keen to know like when to join, if you just want to join the Q&A section, definitely just reach out to our email, which we'll make sure that you have before the end of the session. So this is not the end of the road in case you do have any questions or you just want to connect and have a more one-on-one conversation about your situation. All right, well, with that said, I will go ahead and get underway. So to begin, I would like to acknowledge that UBC's Vancouver campus is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam peoples. And our UBC Okanagan campus, which is where I'm physically located, but I represent both campuses, is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation and their peoples. These lands of both of the UBC campuses that the lands that the UBC campuses are situated on have always been a place of learning for First Nations peoples who for millennia have passed on their culture, their history, language, and traditions from one generation to the next on these lands. All right, so before we jump into a lot of the nitty-gritty of details of the admissions process, I do just want to cover a few bits and pieces just to remind everyone that there's not just one way to join UBC. So of course, there is the option that many of you might be considering if you're here today of going straight into university after high school. This is called direct entry. It is a common pathway, but it is not the only pathway to end up at UBC or to graduate from UBC. So that's great if that's something that you're considering, but I do also just want to make sure people are aware that there are other options to do with transferring. So for anyone who maybe your first choice is to start at another institution and then apply to transfer to UBC later, or maybe you just want to have some really solid alternatives or potentially backup plans in case admission at UBC doesn't happen, transferring is a fantastic option to consider. So there are possibilities of having up to your first year, typically around your first year requirements at another university might transfer over to the requirements for engineering at UBC. Now, disclaimer, there is a whole section on each of the engineering faculty websites that goes through all of the information in case you are planning a future transfer to UBC. Engineering has a few specific things to keep in mind, so definitely check out those sections of the website. But one thing I do want to make sure everyone considers as an alternative, potentially a second plan, a plan B, or even a first plan, is to consider the engineering pathways. So we actually have specific partnerships with some institutions across BC that are specific partnerships for transferring to engineering at both or either of the UBC campuses. So the agreements look different depending on the campus. And again, the full list of all the institutions that we have these agreements with are listed on each of the websites, but definitely check that out to make sure that you're aware, because it could be a great idea to apply to at least one of those options so that you know that even if for whatever reason you don't get admitted to UBC, or maybe your plans just change, that you could start at another place that we have that partnership with and still end up at UBC. There are also things like the Aboriginal Access Studies program, which is a bridging program for Indigenous students. There is Vantage College, which is for international students who might be newer to the English language. So some great options to consider that are not direct entry, but still have you graduating from UBC. Now, Erin, who's been hosting this fantastic event over the last couple of days and then into tomorrow, is also hosting a transfer information session tomorrow, Saturday at 10:30 a.m. So if you are interested, I actually recommend anyone who's joining this session today, please, if you can, I would recommend that you join that session because there's some really great information about how to transfer to UBC with all of those engineering specific details. So there are 3 steps to applying to UBC. We say it's like as easy as 1, 2, 3, which it really truly is, but there are some great pieces of information to keep in mind as you're planning your application to UBC, whether you're in grade 12 now, whether you're maybe planning a transfer, maybe you're in grade 10 or 11 and you're just sort of in the research stage. All of this is still great information for you to be aware of. So step one is actually, what are you going to study at UBC, or what do you want to study at UBC? That's the first decision, and quite a tough one if you're looking at a lot of different options. But if you're here today, obviously you might have a strong interest in engineering. So maybe your mind's already made up and you've already ticked this one off the to-do list. So at UBC, you are going to apply to 2 degree programs. So you are only applying to the degree and the campus, and you will get 2 program choices. So you'll get a first choice program and a second choice degree program and campus. So what that means is you actually truly want to rank these in order of your preference. Your first choice program really should be your first choice, and your second choice program really should be your second choice. Because what will happen is you'll actually only be evaluated for your first choice degree program and campus first, and then only if unsuccessful with that first choice would you be considered for your second choice. So just keep that ranking in mind as you're deciding which options might be best for you. And if you're open to both campuses at UBC for engineering, I do strongly recommend that you consider putting one of our campuses, the Bachelor of Applied Science at one of the campuses as your first choice, and then the Bachelor of Applied Science at the other campus as your second choice to maximize your options with UBC. So what do we offer across the 2 campuses? All right, so you can see the Okanagan is there and Vancouver is there as well. So at the Okanagan campus, there are 4 specializations that fall under the Bachelor of Applied Science. So civil, electrical, manufacturing, and mechanical. And then Vancouver has those 4, but then has 10 additional. So I'm not going to rattle them all off. They're listed there. They all each have really fantastic sections on the faculty website as well, in case you do want to dig a little deeper and see what would be involved in the courses to do with these specializations. So another reminder that when you're applying to UBC, you're just applying to the bachelor's degree itself. So the Bachelor of Applied Science and the campus. So Bachelor of Applied Science, Okanagan, first choice, Bachelor of Applied Science, Vancouver, second choice. You're not actually applying for any of these specializations until the end of your first year. So it's good to know what's available, because some of you might have a really keen interest in some of these areas and you want to make sure that that's actually offered at the campus that you're applying to. But it is good to know that that won't be confirmed when you're not applying for that right away. You're just joining the degree itself first and then going through that specialization application process later in the first year. So step 2 is making sure you meet the requirements. So to me, step 1 and step 2 definitely go hand in hand. Because if you're making those 2 choices about which 2 degree programs and campuses you want to apply to, you obviously want to make sure that you're actually eligible for those degree programs. So it is really important that you check out our website to be sure that you're up to date on all of those required courses that will allow you to be considered for admission. Now, the admissions requirements do vary across the 2 campuses. So you'll also need to make sure that just because you've checked one campus doesn't mean you actually know the requirements for the other. So make sure that you are checking both of those, as well as making sure that you're aware that there are general admissions requirements and then some English language competency requirements as well. So let's take a closer look at where you can find these on our website. So you can visit you.ubc.ca. Now, this is the landing page for anything and everything to do with applying to UBC. So if you haven't checked this out before, write this down or take a picture of this slide. You're going to want to come back to this section quite a few times throughout this process. But once you've landed there, you're going to click apply to UBC, and then admissions requirements. And then if you are in Canada, I know people are joining us from across Canada, but also all around the world for these engineering events. So if you're in Canada, you would pick Canadian high school students. If you're from an IB school, you would actually pick a section called International Baccalaureate. If you're from an international, like you live outside of Canada, you would find that you'll need to pick it'll say international student admissions, and then you'll need to pick the country that you are studying in. And then it will bring you, regardless of which one you choose, it's going to bring you to a similar looking section of the website where you're going to be able to review all of those admissions requirements. So these are screenshots of what it will be for each of the 2 campuses for the Bachelor of Applied Science. Now, this is specific, as you can see here, to anyone. This is just for the sake of this presentation, right? This is for British Columbia students, so students completing high school or studying high school in BC. So you will be able to select the province that you're studying in, and then it will populate the requirements in the correct terminology, course codes, that sort of thing for your province or territory across Canada. Same would be true if you're an international student. It would put it in the correct terminology for your school system. So you pick your province or country, then you're going to pick the applied science degree. And you can see here, this is for Vancouver, this is for Okanagan. This is exactly what it will look like on the website. You can see all of those grade 12 requirements here. Grade 11 requirements are here, but also don't skip. It's easy to miss because these parts populate and are a more active part of the page. It's easy to miss these sections. So you do still need to meet those English language requirements, as well as the general admissions requirements, things like graduating from high school. So make sure that you're familiarizing yourself with both of these, as well as those grade 11 and grade 12 requirements that you can see here. So hopefully that makes sense, and definitely check these out for yourself so that you're able to make sure that you've got the right information for your school system or curricula. All right, so step 1 and step 2, we've checked what we want to study, we've checked the requirements, and we've got our 2 degree programs and campuses ready to roll for the application. Then step 3 is actually submitting that application. So some of you may have actually already started familiarizing yourself with this process. If you have, that's great. Our application only opened very recently, so you're early on that. If you haven't looked at this at all, not to worry. The first deadline, and I'll talk a little bit about deadlines in just a few moments, but the first deadline's not until December, so you got lots of time. But anyway, the Education Planner BC website, you can see here, is where you're going to submit the application. So you can access this link directly off a Google search, or you can access it on the Apply Now button on our website, but it's going to bring you here. So don't be alarmed if you click it on our website and it takes you to this website. This is where you're supposed to end up. So Education Planner BC is essentially a centralized application system for the colleges and universities across the province of British Columbia. So it's allowing you to kind of create one account, but then apply to lots of different institutions in one place. So it's a really streamlined process for you as the applicant, which is great. Now, I've mentioned this a few times, but just in case you're keen to see a visual of what it would look like when you're actually submitting that application to UBC, when you're making your program choice selections, you can see there's a first choice and a second choice. And you can see you pick the campus as well as the degree program. And then the term, you'll see from process of elimination, if you forget this piece of information, that the winter term is the one you're after because it is going to be the one that has September to April. But you can see that you're only applying for the degree and the campus, not the specialization. Now, when you are putting in your second program choice, like you can see here, you're going to see that it says optional. It is optional, but I strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you pick something as your second choice, whether it's in the other engineering degree program at the other campus, or whether it's something completely different. You can mix and match however you want. Definitely put something in there. It's never going to hurt to be able to have a second choice. And a common question that I get asked is, if I put, say, UBC Okanagan Bachelor of Applied Science as my first choice, but then I put Bachelor of Media Studies at Vancouver's campus as my second choice, is the faculty going to think I'm not interested in engineering, or is it going to somehow influence my admissions decision? No, they are not connected in any way. They do not relate to each other. Your first choice degree program truly is evaluated first, and it does not matter. There's no looking at the second choice degree program, basically. They're like two separate things. So only once a decision has been made for your first choice program would they then say you weren't successful, then consider you for the second choice degree program. So not to worry about whether there's some kind of connection or influence. They're essentially, although they're part of the same application, they're essentially two different ways of being considered for admission. So don't worry about that. Now, as you're filling out the application, you're going to fill out a lot of different biographical pieces of information. So your name, your address, where you go to school, all that sort of thing. And one thing that is going to pop up is whether or not you are an Indigenous person of Canada. So if you are, we do highly recommend that you use this opportunity to self-identify as Indigenous, because it automatically puts you in touch with Indigenous advisors. I work very closely with the Indigenous student recruitment team. They're an awesome team. I would love for you to be able to be in touch with them because they just know so many things. They're so warm and friendly. So definitely consider putting down that you are Indigenous, self-identifying that you are Indigenous on your application so you get to connect with them. But also it means that your application will be evaluated by an Indigenous admissions advisor. And you might also be eligible for other Indigenous specific awards or funding opportunities as well. So your application, when you're putting it together, essentially has two main pieces. You've got the academic profile, and then you've got the personal profile. And I'll talk about how those kind of go together in the holistic process in just a moment. But the academic profile, it really is just that. It's going to be where we're evaluating your courses that you've taken, making sure you're actually eligible for the degree program, right? Like you've met the requirements for admission, looking at the types of courses you took. Did you challenge yourself academically? All of those different pieces are how we're going to get to know your academics and your strengths academically and your eligibility academically through that academic profile. But then there is the personal profile. So don't forget that this is also a required and important part of your application to UBC. So we've gotten to know you academically through those courses that you're providing more information about, essentially a list of courses that you're taking, your eligibility, your grades, that sort of thing. That's how we get to know you on the academic side of things. But you as an individual are not just a list of courses, right? You're not just a GPA. You don't go around introducing yourself by a GPA or anything like that. You're a person with a name and all of these interesting and unique things that make you who you are. And that's really the purpose of the personal profile, is to get to know you as the applicant, as a real person who is in this application, who's the person who represents this application. So this is an important part where you're going to be able to answer some short response questions, short essay questions about yourself. There are no right or wrong answers. All of the questions for the personal profile are listed on our website at all times. So you can check those out today if you're keen to take a closer look. And one thing I do recommend is we have weekly virtual application workshops for anyone who is based in Canada for their high school studies. And you can register for those just on that you.ubc.ca website. And we actually go through the personal profile in quite a lot of detail. We'll go through some samples, give you some great tips and advice. So if you have not started that piece yet, or you just want to start brainstorming and that sort of thing, get a better idea of what the purpose of it is in the whole context in a bit more detail, definitely register for one of those. They're happening on a weekly basis. So what do we do with all these pieces, right? So we put the academic performance, so the academic profile, supplementary information, which for you all, if you're applying to engineering, would just be the personal profile. If you're applying to something like, say, music that has an audition piece, or something extra like that, say the Bachelor of Commerce that has the video interview, that all kind of falls under that supplementary information umbrella. That doesn't apply for engineering, just the personal profile will be required. Put it together for that overall evaluation. So we're putting both pieces together to try and get to know you in the most holistic way possible. And just as sort of a little bit of a summary of what that looks like for engineering, you'll see that basically this is just some words to represent the things that I've said, but I know I'm a very visual person, so I like things like this, wanted to include it. The personal profile, you can see what we're looking for there. That's all listed on the website as well, in case you want to come back to this later. So engagement and accomplishment, leadership, substance, and voice. But again, no right or wrong answers there. Your academic average is going to be calculated using those grade 11 and grade 12 academic courses and those required courses, as well as anything that falls into what is the related category. You would have noticed that when we looked at those admissions requirements earlier. There are required courses, which obviously you absolutely have to have in order to be eligible for the degree program. And then related subject areas are areas that the faculty has deemed important for your ability and relevant to be academically successful in the degree program. And so they take a close look at those ones. And this is just a nice little visual. You might want to take a picture of this one because I won't be stopping for very long on this particular one. But this gives you a bit of a timeline to anticipate when different pieces of information might fall into place as you go through this process. Now, the transcripts piece might look different for students across different provinces or across different curricula around the world. So for example, if you're a BC applicant, you actually need to authorize your transcripts to be received by UBC in December, pardon me, in December. So while we as UBC might access the information after that point, you'll be requested for that earlier. So this is just a typical general timeline, but there'll be some specific things that might apply to your situation depending on your province and your curricula. All right, and some key deadlines to keep in mind here. So December 1st is a very important date to write down. You might want to take a picture of this slide as well. This is the deadline that you need to apply for admissions by if you want to be considered for a first round offer of admission, and if you want to be considered for any of our entrance scholarships. So I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in the next slide here. So you need to apply by that 1st of December deadline you see there in the corner for admission, but also if you're applying for a financial need-based scholarship, you also need to submit that scholarship application by the 1st of December in order to be considered for that as well. So if you are applying for financial need-based scholarships, there's 2 pieces that you have to submit by that 1st of December. However, if you're only hoping to be considered for merit scholarships, then we just use your admissions application to evaluate you for those scholarships. So there's no additional application that needs to be submitted, but you definitely need to submit your admissions application by the 1st of December. So you can get a sense of some of these merit and need-based scholarships here. It's a bit of a list. You can see a few of them are engineering specific here that fall under this umbrella of the Presidential Scholars Awards. So you can see even a Women in Engineering Award here for Vancouver. There's one for the Okanagan here, as well as a couple over here in the financial need-based, which is Centennial Scholars Entrance Awards, and then the Beyond Tomorrow Scholars Awards. Now, each of these categories of merit-based and financial need-based scholarships have their own sections on our website if you do want to read up on some of the more specific pieces. But you can see they can be up to $80,000. They might be one time, they might be renewable. There's a lot of variation across these, but the Presidential Scholars Award has its own section online, as well as the Centennial Scholars Entrance Award as well. And I will speak a little bit more about the Beyond Tomorrow Scholars Award and programs. There's also a program with this as well. So UBC recently launched the Beyond Tomorrow Scholars program, as well as the award, to provide financial and institutional wraparound support for self-identifying Black Canadian students. So the program started in September 2021 with an inaugural 13 students, which is very exciting. And it's for students who self-identify as Black, and you can apply for a range of one-time or renewable scholarships up to $80,000. And the Beyond Tomorrow Scholars program is not just an award, but it's also a full sort of program experience as well. And students who I self-identify as Black who would like to be part of that sense of community and take part in the events and workshops and all sorts of fun things that take place across the Vancouver and Okanagan campuses. You can participate in the programming elements even if you are not an award recipient. So it's an absolutely fantastic program. I hope that you'll consider applying for it. And do let me know if you have any more questions about this program and award. And the very last day to apply to UBC is the 15th of January. So if you're not planning to be considered for scholarships or a first round offer of admission, not to worry, the 15th of January is that final deadline that you need to keep in mind. After that, that is the final day though. So please do kind of take a picture, mark it in your calendar, know that that's the absolute last day. I also do recommend with both of these deadlines applying at least a day or two before, because it always breaks my heart if a student has like a technical issue or sometimes maybe a payment issue. I know that I had a couple of panic students last year where the payment didn't work in the system, and by the time it actually came through, it was after the deadline. So definitely don't put yourself in that situation. Maybe write down a couple days before this is the final deadline so that you're not rushing if anything does pop up that's unexpected. All right, and we've gone through a lot of information in a short amount of time here, but definitely know that you can reach out after today. Please do take a picture of this slide so you can see our contact email address right here. So recruitment.ok@ubc.ca is where you're going to be able to send an email if you want to just ask questions via email, if you want to set up a Zoom appointment to chat with anyone or set up an in-person experience, maybe you want to join a campus tour, things like that. You can find out more about all those options through recruitment.ok@ubc.ca, or of course the you.ubc.ca as well. So thank you for listening to me talk at you for a solid half hour there. I will go ahead and pass it back to Erin now.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Lauren. So we definitely have a lot of questions in the Q&A right now. Some of them are duplicates, so I might skip over yours just because it's being answered already. I do recommend that you upvote any questions that you like, because I'll go through in popular to answer like the most popular questions first. Lauren, one of the first questions, of course, the most popular question is, what was the average grade percentage of high school students entering for first year? So maybe you want to, yeah.
It's a great question, but we really don't have a specific GPA or a minimum score or anything like that that you have to get. And I'm sure that's not really the answer that you wanted to hear, but truly that is how this process works. You heard me speak about the admissions process being holistic, right? So we are looking at grades, but we are also looking at your personal profile. And so what we're trying to get a sense of through your academics is, overall, would you be able to be academically successful in a program at UBC? And that's not necessarily tied to one specific score or having, the absolute perfect grades. You might be below what is 100% in everything, but you're still showing overall you could be academically successful. And then, of course, we're looking at that personal profile too. And don't underestimate the power of the personal profile. We are trying to get to know you in a holistic way. And because we use that piece, and because the applicant pool changes every year and the number of applications changes every year, it's really, we don't have any sort of like admit rate or GPA or percentage that would be accurate to represent what it is, just because there's so much variation across the campuses and stuff as well. So really do your best academically, keep striving for the absolute best that you can academically, because the stronger the score in a given academic course, the stronger the message is to admissions about your ability in that particular area. But also come to an application workshop and let us make sure that you have all of the information to craft the strongest personal profile possible for you, because that can be a really key piece of how I guess it can influence your application, because it is such an important part. So don't underestimate that. And hopefully, I'm at lots of the application workshops that are coming up. So hopefully I'll be able to see you all in those sessions very soon.
Perfect. So yeah, there's a few questions about the personal profile that we covered as well. So that's great. A few questions about requirements. So again, going to the you.ubc.ca website to look at those requirements to see what the requirements are specifically to you based on the curriculum that you are currently studying is what you want to look at for that. And then there's a couple questions about if I have AP, will that affect my admissions? If I have a particular grade in a certain class, will that affect my admissions? So maybe, Lauren, you can just reiterate kind of all of those like other pieces that UBC looks at.
Definitely. So, of course, every piece of your application is going to be important, right? That's how you're communicating who you are and what you're doing to admissions. However, things like AP in particular, or even for IB students, we don't have a specific curriculum that is expected that you take, right? So we know different schools offer different curricula options for you to choose from. And we would never want to disadvantage a student and expect them to take part in a curriculum that's not offered at their school, or, the subject's not offered. That would be completely unfair. So we don't have any particular expectation about whether it's provincial or whatever the situation is for your country's curriculum, or whether it's AP or IB. We don't expect anything in particular. You should decide what the right options are for you with your school, with your counselor, with your family, and pick the best options. Now, if you are taking any AP courses or IB courses, we do recognize that there is quite a lot of rigor to those courses. So if you have taken them, there are opportunities to possibly get first-year credit for some of your courses. Now, there's a whole list of all of the courses that are eligible, the scores you need in order to be eligible for that transferable credit for first year. So definitely check that out. It's just on that same you.ubc.ca website. So refer to that and see if you've got anything that might be eligible. You might be able to not have to take one course or something in your first year if you're eligible. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, with things like, a score in a single course, or I know I just had an email right before I hopped on this with a student who was worried because one course that they were taking that is a required course was significantly lower than their course grades in all their other courses that were required. So we're looking at everything, right? We are looking at how you're performing in all of those required courses across grade 11, across grade 12, but also we're looking at those related courses. So everything's looked at in sort of totality, right? So of course we are going to note, say if you have failed a course and are performing strong across other areas, but maybe that course is really important to your ability to be successful in that degree program, like engineering. This was a student who was concerned about failing pre-calculus 12, which is a BC class, but and I was, explaining that would be an important piece of being able to be academically successful. So to keep trying very hard in that class to do their best and to ensure that they're not going to fail, because that is an indicator to admissions about how well you might be able to perform when you're actually at UBC, but everything is looked at. And also if there's any extra context, I know I had a student in the last cycle who had to be in hospital for quite an extended period of time. And obviously, that's a completely different situation to be in and very difficult to ensure that you're performing at your absolute academic best. So if there's any additional context like that, there is a section on your application called additional information. You can provide a little bit of contextual clarification about anything like that might be relevant for your situation, or just reach out to me at that email address that was provided, and we can guide you through that process too and give you more individualized feedback for your situation. But yeah, hopefully that was probably more information than anyone wanted, but hopefully that provides a bit more.
Perfect. And I think maybe to wrap up with our last question for this session, and this is a good one. So for potential scholarships in engineering, does it matter if they put engineering as their first choice program?
That's an excellent question. I'm very glad that you asked that, because yes, it does. So your eligibility for scholarships specifically for those entrance scholarships. So I'm only referring to the ones that were on that slide and that are on our website as UBC entrance scholarships. Like if you're applying to external scholarships, this does not apply. This is only for UBC entrance scholarships. It is tied to your first choice degree program. So you would be considered for admission for, say, Bachelor of Applied Science at Okanagan is your first choice. You would be considered for merit scholarships that are open to associated, I guess, with eligibility for that first choice degree program. So you would be, like you saw on that list, there were some engineering scholarships that are campus specific. So if you're only applying to the Okanagan as your first choice, you'd only be considered for Okanagan merit scholarships. Same with Vancouver. If you're applying to Vancouver, you wouldn't be eligible for the Okanagan ones because it's tied to that first choice.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here, Lauren. I really appreciate you presenting and answering a lot of these questions. So huge thank you again, Lauren. And thank you to everyone for attending.
See you, everyone.